Hello, welcome to Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams. Welcome to another video. Slightly different this one. It's a review of 2025 and a look ahead to next year. I thought it was an opportunity for me to have a chat with a number of viewers, my viewers, about what's going on here on the channel, what I'm up to, my thoughts on the last 12 months, my thoughts on the future ahead of us. Well, a little bit about me. I don't make a big secret of it, but I run this channel in my spare time alongside a job I have in the transport industry. Now, every so often I get asked a bit about my day job and can I include some video content on that? And the answer is no, because I do keep a bit of clear blue water between what I do at work, and those of you that are part of the LinkedIn social media network will see me on LinkedIn talking about my day job. I don't get paid for that, of course. It's part of my job, and any positive coverage I generate belongs to my employer. My hobby here on Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams is just that. It's a hobby. So I steer clear of my day job. I steer clear of the industry that I work in terms of, other rail businesses in the UK. So maybe in the future I'll do a bit more about trains in the UK when I'm not employed where I am now. But at the moment, that's how things are. So we call it Trains, Planes and Trams. But the reality in the last year is it's very much focused on planes. And of course, why is that? Well, it's because you, the viewer, clearly has more interest in my aviation content than you do anything else, and in particular around the British Airways fleet videos. I recently posted what I thought was a pretty decent video about my trip out over the Grand Canyon in a helicopter. Got about 350 views. My latest British Airways fleet update is heading, as I record this, on New Year's Eve for 8,000 views in about 48 hours. So, of course, it's my channel, my rules, I do what I want, but I've also got to have some respect for the audience, and the audience clearly very interested in the British Airways stuff. And I think one of the interesting aspects of that is that the British Airways fleet is a niche that isn't really filled by anyone else. And I was talking to a YouTuber who's far cleverer, far more experienced, far more competent, and more successful than I am. And he was saying, the thing is, Mark, you've pretty much got the British Airways fleet niche to yourself. Nobody else does much to cover it. And whether you like my content or not, it is pretty much the only content on YouTube that does the regular updates. Well, I've talked a little bit about my relationship with my job, but I've also got a young family. I live out in Oxfordshire. Life's quite busy for me. I don't complain about that. I'd certainly be happier being busy than not busy. But of course, they expect to see me and be with me, and I enjoy being with them. But it does limit the amount of time I have to produce videos. I've got quite a backlog of travel videos, and there's a lot of stuff on the British Airways fleet, their fleet strategy, future developments, maybe expanding to look at things like the Virgin Atlantic fleet, which a couple of people have asked me to do, that I just struggle in terms of time. So yeah, some of those things are on the agenda, but for me, this channel is about balancing my time at work, which is pretty full on, if I'm honest, with a busy life at home, which I enjoy, and then finding a bit of time to work on Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams. And I've been reasonably pleased with progress. I've just clicked over 4,500 subscribers. I mentioned a few minutes ago that last video that I did on the British Airways fleet has just exploded in 48 hours, really, nearly 8,000 views. If I'm honest, I don't quite understand the YouTube algorithm. Some of the videos I produce, I think, I've put a lot of effort into that. It's going to be fantastic. Hardly anyone watches it. Sometimes I throw a quick update together in a short period of time and it becomes very successful. So I've given up trying to anticipate how the algorithm will work. But I am grateful to everyone who watches my videos, watches the content. And if you're watching this and you watch my content and you're thinking, what could we do to help Mark? You know, he doesn't have a Patreon account, he doesn't do YouTube membership. Well, fundamentally, you can help me by watching the videos, by liking them, by commenting in the comment section. All those things help. And in terms of Patreon and YouTube membership, again, I don't think they're really compatible with the life that I lead. I've got a full-time job. This is my hobby. I think if you want to have that sort of relationship, it's probably the right relationship to have if that's your full-time job. And some of you say, oh, well, you know, Mark picks up all this information off other websites, or he's copying other people and then he's making money. Well, look, I put about 3 or 4 hours into each of the British Airways fleet updates. My travel videos take longer than that in terms of time to edit, produce, prepare, research. And let me tell you that if I was to take all that time and go off and work in McDonald's on the counter in McDonald's, I could earn 3 times what I earn from YouTube revenue, roughly. So I'm certainly not doing this for the money. I'm doing it for a bit of fun, a bit of entertainment. I know people enjoy watching the content that I produce. And I also know a lot of this stuff interests me anyway, and I'd want to research it and to have a little look at it. So I'm going to carry on doing the fleet updates for British Airways. I wish that I could have a slightly better relationship with British Airways. I'm not saying I have a bad relationship with British Airways, but they've just chosen, I think, to regard me as an irrelevance. I've tried emailing their press office. I've tried linking in with some of their key characters. I have had a conversation about this time last year with their comms director, but it's difficult to keep engaging at that level. And I've got some simple questions that I'd like the British Airways view on. Now, I know some of the stuff I do on my channel is not always positive. You know, a lot of the stories are about things like aircraft failures, aircraft returning after takeoff, aircraft out of service, cancellation, stuff that British Airways probably would prefer is not out there. But equally, I think British Airways should have, you know, the opportunity, if they want it, to tell me what's happened, how they're going to fix it, what they're doing about it, what their strategy is going forward. And I mean, at the end of the day, you know, British Airways is a commercial business. They're not compelled to talk to people like me. So I don't make too much of a thing about it. It's just a personal disappointment for me. And I think it would be nicer for you as a viewer of the channel if we had a bit more input from BA. And I'm hoping perhaps that'll change during 2026. But if it doesn't, I will muddle on and keep producing the content. One of the things I'm thinking of doing is setting up a Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams email address, because at the moment I don't particularly want to advertise all my personal details on the channel, and you probably don't want to tell me things publicly that you might think would be useful, but you would be willing perhaps to share if you had a more direct route. So there'll be an email address set up in the first part of 2026, don't quite know when, and I'll make sure that I take that information. I can't promise to engage with everyone and reply, because that might just not be possible, but I'll certainly do my best to use the information that comes through on it. So there's lots going on the channel. I've got a big backlog of videos from some of my journeys back in 2025 that I'm slowly working my way through. I think I need, if I'm honest, to work through it a bit faster, but I've talked about some of the reasons for that and the challenges that I face. But there will be videos coming: Emirates A380 in first class, a Cathay Pacific long haul journey from Hong Kong to Milan, a bit about Milan trams and Milan transportation, Hong Kong trams and Hong Kong transportation. Even if you don't want to watch it, I think I'll still enjoy watching myself make those videos, and I'll get those out. A few other flights. I've been asked by viewers if I can do another Manchester-London video. I've done quite a few Manchester-London videos, but they don't seem to get diminishing audiences, even though it's the same route, because I've taken different takes on it. You might recall I flew on one of the Airbus A319s or 320s just before it was withdrawn, and made a video about that. And I've been asked to explain and show the viewers what a Terminal 2 experience at Manchester Airport now looks like with BA, with their move across to that terminal. So I'll do that. Your wish is my command. And I also thought I would just share a little bit about some of my journey. So excuse me, I'm just going to pop my my glasses on as my eyesight is failing. I thought I'd just quickly canter through my 2025 travelling experiences. I didn't actually get on a plane in 2025 until towards the end of February. I did London to Manchester and back for an awards ceremony. And I have made this point before, but someone out there might be thinking, that's disgraceful, Mark. You know, you work for the railway industry and you're buying airline tickets on expenses to go off to events. And actually, I can assure you I'm not. I do have train travel available to me, but I choose for those journeys to use my own Avios and pay out my own pocket for the BA extra that they charge on the Avios fares. And I do that just for a bit of fun, because I enjoy it. So Manchester and back, and then shortly afterwards in fact 3 days afterwards, I flew out to Washington Dulles on an Avios redemption, out on an Airbus A350, which was Bravo Foxtrot, and then I stayed the night in Washington and did what I've always wanted to do for a couple of years, which is fly from Washington National Airport. Sadly, the scene of a aviation disaster, it's sad to say, but I did Washington National up to LaGuardia on a Embraer 175 with Republic Airways on the American Eagle brand, and then I came back with American themselves on a Airbus A319 LaGuardia back to Washington National. Back from Washington that evening on a Dreamliner stroke 10 Series 10 Dreamliner Lima Bravo. I quite like the British Airways 787-10s actually. My only hesitation is they've got another 38 of those aircraft on order. So it may be in 4 or 5 years' time we're all a bit bored with 787-10s as they become the dominant aircraft in the British Airways fleet, but quite like them. Another flight back from Manchester, having gone up on the train. And then an Easter holiday with my family. We did it all as an Avios redemption. So Florida via Philadelphia on a British Airways A350 Bravo Romeo, overnight in the Marriott Hotel at Philadelphia, and then down to Orlando on an Airbus A321. Bit of fun in Florida, a small cruise, which I'll also try and do a video of, and then Orlando to Atlanta with Delta Airlines, first class on a 757 with Pratt & Whitney engines. That video is nearly finished, so if you want to watch a video all about a 757 flight in the US, then stay tuned to Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams. Back from Atlanta on the BA flight on a 777-200. No video for that, it's not that exciting, although it's quite odd flying with British Airways out of Atlanta, because Atlanta is just absolutely dominated by Delta, and you really do feel a bit out of place as you're struggling to find your British Airways flight in Atlanta amongst all those Delta, and also of course their alliance partners, people like KLM, for example, very significant there, Virgin as well. I flew up to Newcastle at the beginning of May, from Heathrow back by train. And then I did a bit of a plane grising trip at the beginning of May. After that Newcastle trip, a week later, I went out London Doha with Qatar on an A380 business class top deck, and then into the lounge, bit of fun in the Al Safwa lounge, and then back onto the same aircraft for Doha to Bangkok, but in first class because they had redemption availability in first class. So video coming up on that experience as well. Overnight in Bangkok, and then of course that Emirates A380 top deck first class, £450 from Bangkok to Hong Kong. So you know, you've never heard of a YouTuber doing Bangkok to Hong Kong for 450 quid, have you? All right, maybe you have, but I've joined the club and I'll be doing my own video on that journey very soon. Great time in Hong Kong, sort of 36 hours there. I love Hong Kong. It's my sort of 7th or 8th visit. And then I was going to come back with Qatar, but just a couple of days before I was due to fly back, I spotted a Cathay redemption on the BA website that allowed me to fly in their business class, not the new Aria Suites, the old business class, but really interesting. 777 from Hong Kong to Milan. That's the longest flight that I've taken so far this year, 5,821 miles. I was due to whiz across Milan from Malpensa to Linate, but I just knew with immigration and traffic and trains and check-in that wasn't going to work, and had a big argument with British Airways about moving to a later flight, which they insisted on charging me £25 for, which I thought was a bit off. Of course, if I'd have missed the connection, I'm sure they'd have rebooked me, but I didn't really want the stress. But it did give me a bit of time to have a look at the trams in Milan. There's a video on my site, and I'll try and put a link soon up here for you to have a look at that video, which summarised my trip very briefly. The Peter Witt trams operating in Milan are just amazing if you like your trams. And then I flew back to London, quite an interesting flight, Tango November Echo Foxtrot. It was only its 4th revenue earning flight, having flown in brand new out of the factory a few days before in Hamburg. So back to London on a brand new plane, and then I've flown to Berlin and back from Dusseldorf. Nothing too exciting. My 2 girls decided to treat me for my birthday with a day trip to Hamburg and a trip to Miniature Wonderland. So that was quite good fun, out and back on 320s. I had a special trip out to Paris. Normally I'd use the Eurostar, but I chose to fly out on Air France on an Airbus A220, which I really enjoyed actually. The service on board in Air France, really good in economy and in business class, and the use of the lounge at Heathrow, very good as well. Trip to Dublin and back with Aer Lingus on an A320, nothing particularly special there. One of my daughters was performing in Las Vegas in October half term, so I flew out on the last ever British Airways flight from Gatwick to Las Vegas at the end of October, last Saturday of the summer schedules, and I've done a video on that, and that video's on the website as well. Back 5 days later on the BAA 350 Bravo Golf, and then, as you may have seen from some of the recent videos, I've just come back from Dubai, went out on the BA 107 with an A3 Echo Foxtrot, and back on a 787-10 Lima Golf, and that wraps up my flying and my trips around the Europe and the world for 2025. Now, slightly unusually for me, I'm sat here a couple of minutes before the start of 2026, and I've got no flights booked, which is not what it's been like for the last 2 or 3 years. I'm just quite busy at the moment. I've got this huge backlog of videos. My family are not quite sure what they want to do in terms of holidays, although we're well aware we need to get something booked up. So that's probably a job for the first week or 2 of January. And my plans for the channel, for Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams, well, you know, I've got my job. I'm going to focus most of my attention, if I'm honest, on my job and on my family. And that means the channel doesn't always get the attention that perhaps it could have if I didn't have those other priorities. But that's my life, and that's where I am. Now, I am going to do a few more special videos. I want to talk about British Airways and how you stand in terms of chances of getting a club suite when you book in business class with British Airways. I want to update my long haul fleet strategy, and I'm thinking of doing that as a series of questions and saying, well, here's 10 or 15 or even 20 questions about the British Airways long haul fleet. Questions like, what's going to happen to first class in the future on British Airways long haul? We know the new first class will appear in the A380s and on the 777-9s, but what happens to the rest of the fleet in terms of first class? Now, British Airways are tight-lipped about all this, and I understand that. They're in a competitive environment. They're competing with Virgin Atlantic. They're competing with other carriers across the Atlantic. They don't necessarily want to reveal their cards, and I don't know exactly what will happen, but I do know what some of the options are, and I'll be talking about that. I might also start doing a little bit more about Virgin Atlantic. Their fleet's a lot smaller than British Airways, but they've just restored in the last couple of weeks the last of the 787-9s they had stood down with Rolls-Royce engines, which begs the question, if Virgin can sort their 787s out, why are British Airways not resolving their issues to a similar timescale? But Virgin have got their own fleet strategy, and we'll talk about that, I think, in a video as well. I also thought it might be fun to look at some of the routes that have high density operations out of the UK, maybe London, New York, London, Dubai. Have a look at where you can fly, not London, perhaps the UK, and look at the variety of origin airports in the UK. But we'll see how all that goes. I've also got a bit of an interest in the new Charles de Gaulle Airport Express that's opening in Paris. And I thought that might make a fun video before it opens, just to talk about why that's opening, how they've established it commercially, look at the construction, and look at what the product may look like at the point it's finished. But those are just some thoughts. Always interested to get your comments. What do you think about my idea for having an email address for you to email me items for the BA Fleet News? What about those video ideas? I've talked about some of my flights from last year that we've not put on a video yet. Which of those would be your priority? But I think the most important thing to get across in this video is really just to say thank you. You know, I never set out to be a big YouTuber, and I'm certainly not a big YouTuber, but the channel's been more successful than I imagined it would be. My British Airways fleet updates have had far more views than perhaps I thought they would, and I'm enjoying producing it. It is hard work. Occasionally I struggle to get the videos together. That's what happened a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of days ago I should say, while I was out in Dubai, and I referenced that I'd had one of my family receive medical attention, and she's absolutely fine now, although we were a bit worried at the time. So thanks for your kind comments, but apologies for the disruption in getting videos sorted. Also some tech issues out in Dubai, which hopefully I won't face here in the UK. I hope you've enjoyed watching the channel. I wish you all the best for next year, for 2026. If you're watching this in 2026, welcome to the new year, and I hope to see you on the channel real soon with some of that content. All the best.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and click the notification button so you don't miss any of the great trips Mark has coming your way on this YouTube channel.